Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll continue our reading of Chinua Achebe's A Man of the People. We're on chapter 6. Anyone who has followed this story at all carefully may be well wondering what has become of the Elsie whom I said was my chief reason for going to Bori. Exactly, because we just heard about an Elsie, right? Well, that chief reason has not altered in the least. I had, in fact, written to her as soon as I had arrived and then paid her a visit at the hospital on the following Saturday morning. But she was still on night duty and had been waked up from sleep against the rules of our hospital to see me. So that first visit had to be very short. Actually, the reason I went at all was to confirm that she was coming to the house to spend the 2 free days she would earn after the night shift, and that she was bringing a friend of hers along for Chief Nanga, although we did not spell it out so crudely. In our country, a long American car, driven by a white uniformed chauffeur and flying a ministerial flag, could pass through the eye of a needle, so they could go anywhere. The hospital gateman had promptly levered up the iron barrier and saluted. The elderly male nurse to had I beckoned to had sprinted forward with an agility that you would think he had left him at least a decade ago. And, as I said earlier, although it was against all the laws of the hospital, they had let me into the female nurse's quarters and waked up Elsie to see me. Although she was obviously very drowsy, her unconcealed pleasure tempted me very strongly to stay longer than was reasonable or fair. Her sleeping head tie hooded her face almost down to the eyebrows and completely covered both ears, so she was wearing a bonnet. But despite this and the sleep swollen eyes, she was as desirable as ever, and she was ready. It was just like her to start rushing around looking for a soft drink and biscuits for me. I quite firmly refused. In fact, I was already on my feet when the other girl came in to greet me. She obviously did not feel as confident as Elsie about her looks and had taken time to touch up. I tried very hard, but could not recollect her face at all, even though Elsie said she had introduced us at a university party. She was reasonably good looking, but in that pointed mandibular way that made me think of the talkative weaver bird. Yet she hardly said a word, and when I finally rose to go, she did not even go with us to the car outside. Strangely uncurious for one of our women, I thought. As Elsie and I walked to the car, I said humorously, I hope Chief Nanga won't ask for a swap. For what? She asked with a puzzled look. Then it occurred to me that she might have never heard that word, so I explained and we laughed. I thought you meant the cotton wool we use in the theater, she said, and we laughed again. Then she remembered to add graciously that a swap would not be necessary as her friend was the more beautiful of the two. If you're looking for flattery from me this afternoon, you won't get it, I said, stooping at the door which the chauffeur had been holding open since I first emerged from the night nurse's dormitory. By the way, I said, backing out and straightening up again, I met an American lady called Elsie at the party the other night. Whatever her name was called, my mind went to you. Who tell say a non LCBM name? When you see him again, tell him I say, I'm on Elsie na counterfeit, but Odili yourself na wa. How you know even reach body finish? You done begin meet another Elsie for party? Make you take GGO. Relax, I said, imitating Jean. What is wrong with telling you I met your namesake at a party? Actually, I was pleased to see Elsie jealous. I meant to go on to say, and had in fact half opened my mouth to begin saying that she needn't worry, that the other Elsie was no patch on her. But quickly I changed my mind for tactical reasons. Instead, I said that if I wanted a second girlfriend, I would pick one with a different name, if only to avoid confusion. Nah lie, she said, smiling her seductive two-dimpled smile. The way I look you in eye, I fit say that even 10 Elsies not fit Bella for you. Nonsense, I said. Abby them take Elsie make juju for me, I asked, laughing. I know, she shrugged. You supposed to know, I said. The shoulder dropped a very broad and rude hint that at this point, by shutting the door again, I chose to ignore him. Wait and be the name of your friend's car. Cadillac. Ah, this not the famous Cadillac. I don't think I didn't see him before. She was full of girlish excitement. Not tough car. E.g. You think, say these people go another heaven after this? My sister, I know no all. Anyway, make we follow them chop small for this world. I opened the door for myself and went in, and she helped close it. I'll be there on Saturday then at 4. Run along now and sleep, my darling. I sat back with a proprietary air unusual for me. She stood waving until we disappeared around the bend. That Thursday evening at 6, the minister was due to open the first ever book exhibition of the works by local authors. I was especially interested in it because I had ambitions to write a novel about the coming of the first white men to my district. He came back for lunch around 2:30, clutching the speech that they had prepared for him. Apparently, he had been so busy at the office that he hadn't had the time to look at it at all. So I thought he was going to sit down and quickly run through it. But no, he would he put the file away on top of the bookshelf and began to talk about our trip to the hospital. I hadn't realized till then, and perhaps Chief Nanga himself hadn't, that he was going with me. I hope they will be ready when we get there. Yes, I told Elsie you had to be at the other place at 6. Tell me something, Odili. How serious are you about this girl, Elsie? You mean about marriage? Good Lord, no. She's just a good time girl. Kabu Kabu, he asked with a twinkle in his eye. Yes, sort of, I said. Although what I said about marriage was true enough, yet it was grossly unfair at that stage in my relationship with Elsie to call her simply a good time girl. I suppose what happened was that Chief Nanga and I, having already swapped many tales of conquest, I felt somehow compelled to speak in derogatory terms about women in general. In fact, I had already told the story of my first meeting with Elsie, however, without identifying her. Chief Nanga had 5 stories to every one of mine. The best I thought was about the young married woman who never took off her brassiere. It was not until many encounters that Chief Nanga managed to extract from her that her husband, apparently a very jealous man, had put some juju on her breast to scare her into faithfulness. His idea was presumably that she would not dare to expose that part of her to another man, much less other parts. What a fool, I said. And he was trying to be so clever. If fool pass Getty Getty, said Chief Nanga. Which person tell me I'm not Bob them take them to do the thing? Nonsense. But that woman was Wana, I said. What kind of sense for head? Woman, rhapsodied Chief Nanga. Any person we tell you say woman got no sense just to talk pure jargon. When woman no want to do something, ego left. But you no fool yourself say he left the thing before ego get sense for do. How true, I thought. It had been a bit of a surprise to me when Chief Nanga had announced he was coming with me to the hospital. I couldn't very well advise him coldly to stay behind and read through his speech, but I had a strong suspicion he had forgotten all about it, and I felt it only fair that I should remind him. I considered various approaches and then decided on the one that seemed to me to conceal the most satisfactorily the small element of self interest. I wish I could help in any way with checking your speech, I said, but I just cannot read in a moving car. Oh, that speech, he said wearily. I shall finish it in 10 minutes. It's not important. If I had known, I should have asked my parliamentary secretary to go and represent me. Anyhow, it's not bad. Talking is in my blood now. From teaching into politics, all na so talk. Actually, I had no serious reason for wanting to go alone. It was true I had formed a pretty clear mental picture of how it was all going to happen, as it were, under my command. But it didn't really matter and certainly wouldn't hurt anyone if it happened differently. For instance, it would have been rather nice sitting between the 2 girls at the back. Now I would probably sit with the chauffeur, or better, Elsie, and I could sit in the front. There was enough space, really, to leave the back for the minister to get acquainted with the other girl. As it happened, all my worry was wasted. The other girl, I don't know what I've done to that girl's name, couldn't come on account of a sudden illness. I was very disappointed and a little angry, even though Elsie had sworn that it was a genuine illness. Fortunately, Chief Nanga didn't seem to mind at all, which was hardly surprising for a man with so many women ready to make themselves available. I remember him announcing twice or thrice on our way back with Elsie sitting between us that he had been an important cabinet meeting, that he had an important cabinet meeting which would probably last all night tomorrow, and that he must try and get some sleep tonight. At first, I thought he was showing off to the girl, and then I decided it was his wicked way of saying that the coast was completely clear for us. So, in my gratitude, I began to tell Elsie how little time he had spared for himself and his family. If somebody want to make you minister, said Chief Nanga, coming to my support, make you no gree. Be no be good life. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, said Elsie. Not true, my sister, said the chief. I think I tell you, say Chief Nanga Digo open book exhibition for 6 today, I said. Book exhibition, said Elsie. How they that one again? My sister, you make the ask for me so. Oh, I be think say na name na me. One never hear that kind of thing before. But they say me na minister of culture. And as such, I supposed to be there. I know fit say no. Wait and be minister. No be public football. So instead of me to sit on rest for house like other people, I did go knack grammar school for this hot afternoon. You didn't see this kind of trouble before? We all laughed, including the driver, whose face I could see in the mirror. We joked and laughed all the way back. So they were having a good time. Greetings, Sister Raw and the elders listening with you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. In Chief Nanga's company, it was impossible not to be merry. We were met outside the exhibition hall by the president of the Writers' Society, a fellow I used to know quite fairly well at university. In those days, before he became a writer, he had seemed reasonably normal to me, but apparently, since he published his novel, The Song of the Blackbird, he had become quite different. I read an interview he gave to a popular magazine in which it had came out that he had become so nonconformist that he now designed his own clothes. Judging by his appearance, I should say he also tailored them. He had on a white and blue squarish gown with a round neck and no buttons over brown striped baggy trousers made from the kind of light linen material we sometimes call obey the wind. He also had a long, untidy beard. I had expected that in a country where writers were so few, they would all be known personally to the Minister of Culture, but it was clear Chief Nanga hadn't even heard the man's name before. He is the author of The Song of the Blackbird, I said. I see, said Chief Nanga, whose attention was clearly elsewhere at that moment. So our society includes musicians as well, he asked in one fleeting return of interest. But by the time the Gilo said no, his attention had again strayed from us. Hello, Gilio, I said, stretching my hand to shake his almost in commiseration. He replied hello and took my hand, but obviously he did not remember my name and didn't seem to particularly care. I was very much hurt by this and immediately formed a poor opinion of him and his silly airs. You didn't tell me, Mr. began the minister abruptly. Giglio, sir. Thank you, Mr. Giglio. Why didn't you tell me that you are expecting ambassadors at this function? His eyes were still ranging over the parked cars, some of them carrying diplomatic number plates and two flying flags. I am sorry, sir, said Mr. Gilo. But and you come to the chairman such an occasion like this? He accompanied the last two words with an upward movement of a scornful left finger, taking the whole out of Mr. Gilo's person. "What part of the country are you?" he asked. I didn't know what to feel. If Giglio hadn't carried those pretentious airs, my sympathies would certainly have stayed with him. But now I must confess, I was a little pleased to see him deflated. "Is that what you call national dress in your place?" perused, pursued Chief Nanga mercilessly. "I dress to please myself, sir," said the writer, becoming suddenly defiant. "Let me tell you," said Chief Nanga in a softened but firm tone, "if you want me to attend any of your functions, you must wear a proper dress. Either you wear a suit, or if you don't like it, you can wear our national costume. That is correct protocol." It was getting quite embarrassing for me, especially when Chief Nanga mentioned a suit and turned to nod approvingly in my direction. For much as I liked Giglio's pretentiously bizarre habit, I did not care to be set up as a model of correct dressing. Then, suddenly adopting a paternal and conciliatory tone, Chief Nanga reminded us young people that we were the future leaders of our country. "I don't care if you respect me or not," he said, "but our people have a saying that if you respect today's king, others will respect you when your turn comes. We better go in." In spite of this inauspicious beginning, Mr. Giglio went ahead and said many flattering things about Chief Nanga, albeit with a clouded face. He said it was a fitting and appropriate tribute to his concern for African culture, a concern which had been known all over the world, that a university in far-away America was soon to honor him with a doctorate degree. Chief Nanga stood up magnificently and drew up the sleeves of his robe back to his shoulders with two deft movements of his arms. He did not plunge right away into his prepared script, but first made a few remarks of his own. He stood sideways to thank the president of the Writers' Society, looking him over for half a second so that I was afraid he might revert to the subject of dress. Fortunately, he did not. He smiled indulgently a little and a little wickedly and said he was honored to be invited by Mr. Giglio to open the exhibit. As you know, Mr. Giglio is the president of this society, which has already done much to project the African personality. I believe Mr. Giglio himself has composed a brilliant song. What's it called again? He asked Mr. Giglio. Fortunately, this was mistaken for witticism and was greeted with loud laughter. It was from her vivacious laugh that I then noticed Jean sitting in the row in front of Elsie and behind me. Her husband John was sitting with her. I hadn't realized he was back. I whispered into Elsie's ear that was the woman who gave the party I spoke about. "Is she the famous Elsie?" she whispered back. "No, her friend." "So no be only one even," she said, smiling. "Odilly the Great." She often shortened my name to Odie the Great. I didn't listen much to Chief Nanga's speech. When Elsie and I were not whispering into each other's ears, I was thinking about the night, or even such irreverent things as the dress of some of the people in the room. There was one man I noticed particularly. His robes were made of some expensive looking European woolen material which was not so strange in these days. But what surprised me was that the tailor had remained the cloth's thin yellow border on which the manufacturer advertised in endless and clear black type 100% wool made in England. In fact, the tailor had used this advertisement to ornamental advantage on both sleeves. I was struck again by the people's endless resourcefulness, especially when it came to taste in clothes. I noticed that whenever the man hitched up his sleeves, which he did every 2 or 3 minutes, he did it very carefully so that the quality of his material would not be lost in the many rich folds of the dress. He also wore a gold chain around his neck. So he was showing off. And as you can see, the chief minister was about protocol and what was important because it has to look right to our people, right? And when you consider his position, it was a bit of a disrespect of him for the president of the society to say he dresses to please himself and not necessarily to please the mass of people. This is interesting. And just like today, we have our label whores, people that want to flatter and show off the brand that they're wearing more so than anything else. This man with the made 100% wool made in England tags still on his clothes to make sure everybody knew where it came from. Chapter 7. Chief Nang, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Chief Nanga was a born politician. He could get away with almost anything he said or did. And as long as men are swayed by their hearts and stomachs and not their heads, the chief Nangas of this world will continue to get away with anything. He had the rare gift of making people feel, even while saying harsh things to them, that there was not a drop of ill will in his entire frame. I remember the day he was telling his ministerial colleague over the telephone in my presence that he distrusted our young university people and that he would rather work with the European. I knew I was hearing terrible things, but somehow I couldn't bring myself to take the man seriously. He had been so open and kind to me and not in the least distrustful. The greatest criticism a man like him seemed capable of invoking in our country was an indulgent, make you know min This is, of course, a formidable weapon, which is always guaranteed to save its wielder from the normal consequences of misconduct, as well as from the humiliation and embarrassment of ignorance. For how else would you account for the fact that a minister of culture announced in public that he had never heard of his country's most famous novel and received applause, as indeed he received again later when he prophesied that before long our great country would produce writers great like Shakespeare, Dickens, Jane Austen, Bernard Shaw, and raising his eyes off the script, Michael West and Dudley Stamp. At the end of the function, Mr. Giglio and the editor of the Daily Mache had came forward to congratulate him and to ask for copies of the speech. Chief Nanga produced two clean copies from his file, bent down at the table and amended the relevant portions in his own fair hand by the addition of those two names to the list of famous English writers. I knew the editor already from a visit he had paid the minister a few days earlier. a greasy-looking man. He had at first seemed uneasy about my presence in the room, and I had kept a sharp look out for the slightest hint of Chief Nanga to get up and leave them, but no hint was given. On the contrary, I felt he positively wanted me to stay, so I stayed. Our visitor took a very long time to come to the point, whatever it was. All I could gather was that he had access to something which he had been holding back in Chief Nanga's interests. But it was clear that the minister did not attach very great importance to whatever it was. In fact, he appeared to be sick and tired of the man, but dared not say so. Meanwhile, excuse me. Meanwhile, the journalist told us one story after another. A disgusting white foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. He drank 2 bottles of beer, smoked many cigarettes, and then got a dash of £5 from the minister after an account of his trouble with his landlord over arrears of rent. Apparently, it was not a straightforward case of debt, but since the landlord and the journalist came from different tribes, the element of tribalism could not be ruled out. Mm. So tribalism was a noted problem even at that time. You see what it means to be the minister, said Chief Nanga, as soon as his visitor left. His voice sounded strangely tired, and I suddenly felt sorry for him. This was the nearest I had seen him come to despondency. If I don't give him something now, tomorrow he will go and write rubbish about me. They say it is the freedom of the press, but to me, it is nothing short of the freedom to crucify innocent men and assassinate their character. I don't know why our government is so afraid to deal with them. I don't say they should criticize. After all, no one is perfect except God, but they should criticize constructively. So that other afternoon, when the journalist came forward to get a copy of the speech and shouted, "First rate, sir, I should put it in the front page instead of the story I have promised the Minister of Construction." I just wondered if he ever suspected where he and his stories would be if Chief Nanga had his way. So he was accepting bribes for front page press. It must have been about 8 o'clock. It was certainly dark when we left the exhibition to drive back home. As soon as the car moved, I dovetailed my 2 fingers into Elsie's lap and threw the other arm across her shoulders in a bold, proprietary gesture. "That was a beautiful speech, and you didn't have much time to go over it," I said, just to get some talk going while privately I throbbed with expectation. And imagine that, and imagine an image that would never until then enter my mind appeared to me now. I saw Elsie, or rather didn't see her, as she emerged so completely in the darkness of my room. Unlike Jean, who remained half undissolved like some apparition, as she put her things on in the dark. When an old woman hears the dance, she knows her old age deserts her, replied Chief Nanga in our language. I laughed more loudly than the proverb deserved, and then translated it for Elsie, who spoke a different language. We used the laughter to get a little closer so that the arm I had over her shoulder slipped under her arm to her breast, and I pressed her against my side. When we got back, Chief Nanga and I had whiskey while Elsie went upstairs to change. Incidentally, when our first return from the hospital, When on our first return from the hospital, Chief Nanga had told his steward to take Elsie's bags to his absent wife's room, I had been greatly alarmed, but then I quickly reassured myself that he was merely displaying great tact and delicacy, and I felt grateful, just as I had done when he told us of the all night cabinet meeting. There was only a short flight of stairs between my room and the ground floor where Elsie was being installed. When all went silent, I would go up quietly, tap on her door, find her waiting, and take her downstairs to my room, and we could pretend that our host was none the wiser. We had an excellent dinner of rice, ripe plantains, and fried fish. Elsie looked ripe and ready in a shimmering yellow dress, took us back to the president of the Writers Association in his funny garb. I found myself putting a feeble kind of defense up. Writers and artists sometimes behave that way, I said. I think he will heed my advice, said Chief Nanga. He is a well comported young man. This surprised me a great deal. I suppose it was J. Leo's flattering words in introducing the minister that did it, or more likely, Chief Nanga had not missed the most deferential manner in which most of the ambassadors had approached Jalio with a copy of his book for an autograph. I remember looking at Chief Nanga and then seeing astonishment and unbelief on his face, but I did not think it was enough to persuade him to call Jalio a well comported young man so soon after their clash. The words well comported struck me almost forcibly as the sentiment they conveyed. I couldn't say whether it was right or wrong, and in any case, you felt once again that such distinctions did not apply here. Chief Nanga was one of those fortunate ones who had just enough English and not one single word more to have his say strongly without inhibition and colorfully. I remember his telling me of a fatal accident he once had driving from Anata to Bori. Since he was still alive, I assumed that someone else had been killed. But as the story unfolded, I realized that fatal meant no more than very serious. I retired soon after dinner so that the others might take the cue, and Elsie did. The second time I peeped out, she was no longer there in the sitting room, but Chief Nanga sat, stolidly looking at the file of the speech he had already given. Every 2 minutes or so, I came to the door and peeped out, and there he was. Could he be asleep? No, his eyes seemed to be moving across the page. I was getting quite angry. Why didn't he take the blessed file to his study? Perhaps that hurt me. What hurt me most was the fact that I could not muster up sufficient bravado to step into the sitting room and up the stairs. Perhaps he even expected me to do so. Let me say that I do not normally lack resolution in this kind of situation, but Chief Nanga had, as it were, cramped my style from my very first introducing of an element of delicacy into the affair, thus making it not so much a question of my own resolution as of my willingness to parade Elsie before a third person as a common slut. There was nothing, there was nothing for it but to wait in anger. I sat on my bed, got up again, and paced my room, barefoot in my pajamas. It seemed a full hour before Chief Nanga finally switched the lights off and turned in. I gave him about 5 to 10 minutes to settle in his bed while I had time to steady myself from the strain of the last hour and the unsettling effect imminent fulfillment always has on me. Then I began to tiptoe upstairs, running my palm up the wood railing for guidance. By the time I got to the landing, my eyes were fairly at home in the darkness, and it was easier finding Elsie's door. My hand already on the knob when I heard voices within. I was transfixed to the spot. Then I heard laughter and immediately turned around and went down the stairs again. I did not go into my room straight away, but I stood for long minutes in the sitting room. What went on in my mind at that time lacked form, and I cannot now set it down. But I remember finally deciding that I was jumping to conclusions, that Chief Nanga had, in all probability, simply opened the unconnecting door. That Chief Nanga had, in all probability, opened the connecting door between the two rooms to say goodnight and exchange a few pleasantries. I decided to give him a minute or two more and then discarding this pussyfooting business, boldly go up and knock on Elsie's door. I went back to my room to wait, switched on the bedside lamp, which was worked by a short silvery rope instead of a normal switch, looked at my watch, which I had taken off and put beside the stool on a bedside stool. It was already 10:30. This stung me into activity again. I hadn't thought it was so late. I rushed into the sitting room and made to bound up the stairs when I heard from a great distance Elsie deliriously screaming my name. I find it difficult in retrospect to understand my inaction at the moment. A sort of paralysis had spread over my limbs, while an intense pressure was building up inside my chest. Before before it reached a raging point, I felt it siphoned off, leaving me empty inside and out. I trudged up the stairs in the incredible delusion that Elsie was calling on me to come and save her from her ravisher. But when I got to the door, a strong revulsion and hatred swept over me, and I turned sharply away and went down the stairs for the last time. I sat on my bed and tried to think with my head in my hands, but a huge sledgehammer was beating down on my brain as on an anvil, and my thoughts were scattering sparks. I soon realized that what was needed was action, quick, sharp action. I rose to my feet and willed myself about gathering my things into the suitcase. I had no clear idea what I would do next, but for the moment, that did not trouble me. The present loomed so large. I brought down my clothes one at a time from the wardrobe, folded them, and packed them neatly. Then I brought my things from the bathroom and put them away. These simple operations must have taken me a long time to complete. In all that time, I did not think anything particularly. I just bit my lower lip until it was sore. Occasionally, words like, "Good heavens," escaped me and came out loud. He was so distraught at what she was doing by sleeping with the minister that he had no words for the feelings that he was feeling at that time. The anguish, the frustration, the betrayal. Greetings, Bawana Haguziki. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, earlier he was ripe and ready, but now he was feeling betrayed. When I had finished packing, I slumped down in the chair and then got up again and went into the sitting room to see if the sounds were still coming. But all was now dark and quiet upstairs. My word, I remember saying when I went to wait for Elsie. I knew she would come down, shedding tears of shame, and I would kick her out and bang the door after her forever. I waited and waited, and then, strange as it may sound, I dozed off. When I started to wake, I had the dull, heavy terror of knowing that something terrible had happened without immediately remembering what it was. Of course, the uncertainty only lasted 1 second or less. Recollecting the panic, and panic followed soon enough. And then the humiliating wound came alive again and began to burn more fresh than when it was first inflicted. My watch said a few minutes past 4, and Elsie had not come. My eyes misted, a thing that had not happened to me in God knows how long. Anyway, the tears hung back. I took off my pajamas, got into other clothes, and left the room by the private door. I walked for hours, keeping to the well lit streets. The dew settled on my head and helped to numb my feelings. Soon my nose began to run, and I hadn't brought a handkerchief. I blew it into the roadside drain by closing each nostril in turn with my first finger. As dawn came, my head began to clear a little, and I saw Bori stirring. I met a night soil man carrying his bucket for odor on top of a battered felt hat down to hood his upper face, while his nose and mouth were masked with a piece of black cloth like a gangster. I saw beggars sleeping under the eaves of luxurious apartment department stores, and a lunatic sitting wide awake by the basket of garbage he called his possession. The first red buses running empty passed me, and I watched the street lights go off finally around 6. I drank in all these details with the early morning air. It was strange, perhaps, that a man who had so much on his mind should find time to pay attention to these small, inconsequential things. It was like the man in the proverb who was carrying the carcass of an elephant on his head and searching with his toes for a grasshopper. But that was how it happened. It seems that no thought, no matter how great, had the power to exclude all others. As I walked back to the house, I tried in vain to find the kind of words I needed to speak to Chief Nanga. As for Elsie, I should have known that she was a common harlot, and the less laid about her, the better. The less said about her, the better. Chief Nanga was outside his gate, apparently looking out for me when I came round the last bend. He happened just then to be looking in the opposite direction and did not see me at once. My first reaction on seeing him was to turn back. Fortunately, I did not give in to that kind of panic. In any case, he turned round just then, saw me, and began to come toward me. "Where have you been, Odili?" he asked. I we have been looking for you. I nearly phoned 999, which is their version of 911. "Please don't talk to me again," I said. "What? Wonders will never end. What is wrong, Odili?" "I said, don't talk to me again," I replied as coolly as possible. "Wonders will never end. Is it about the girl? But you told me you were not serious with her. I asked because I don't like any misunderstandings. And I thought you were tired and had gone to sleep." Look here, Mr. Nanga. Respect yourself. Don't provoke me any more unless you want our names to come out in the newspapers today. Even to myself, I sounded strange. Chief Nanga was really taken aback, especially when I called him Mr. You have won today, I continued, but watch it. I will have the last laugh. I never forget. Elsie was standing at the door with arms folded across her bust when I came in at the gate. She immediately rushed indoors and disappeared. When I brought out my suitcase, Chief Nanga, who had not said another word since I insulted him, came forward and tried to put a hand on my shoulder in one last effort at reconciliation. Don't touch me. I eased my shoulders away like one avoiding a leper's touch. He immediately recoiled. His smile hardened on his face, and I was happy. Don't be childish, Odili, he said paternally. After all, she is not your wife. What is all this nonsense? She told me there's nothing between you and she, and you told me the same thing. But anyway, I am sorry if you are offended. The mistake is mine. I tender unreserved apology. If you like, I can bring you 6 girls this evening. You go do the things Sote go beg you saying you won't go again. Ha 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 ha. What a country, I said. You call yourself Minister of Culture. God help us. And I spat. Not a full spit, but a token, albeit unmistakable one. Look here, Odili. He turned on me then like an incensed leopard. I will not stomach any nonsense from any small boy for the sake of a common woman, you hear? If you insult me again, I will show you pepper. You young people of today are very ungrateful. Imagine. Anyway, don't insult me again, oh. You can't do a damn all, I said. You are just a bush. I cut myself short and walked out, lumbering my suitcase past Dogo, the one-eyed stalwart who had presumably heard our voices and come out from the boys' quarters in his sleeping loincloth to investigate. Nah, this boy da holla for master and face. I heard him ask. Don't mind the stupid idiot, said Chief Nanga. He no fit in some master like that here and comfort free. Hey, my friend, he shouted, coming after me. Are you there? His voice was full of menace. I was then halfway to the outside gate. I turned boldly round but on second thoughts said nothing, turned again and continued. Leave him, Dogo. Make him carry bad luck de go. Not my own mistake for bring him here. Ungrateful ingrate. I was now at the gate, but his voice was loud and I heard every word. I took a taxi to my friend Maxwell's address. Maxwell Kulamo, a lawyer, had been my classmate at grammar school. We called him Cole Max or Cool Max in those days, and his best friends still did. He was the poet laureate of our school, and I still remember the famous closing couplet of a poem he wrote when our school beat our rivals in the intercollegiate soccer competition. Hurrah to our incomparable fullbacks. The writer of these lines is Cool Max. He was already fully dressed for court, striped trousers and black coat, and was eating breakfast when I arrived. The few words I spoke to Nanga and the fairly long taxi ride had combined to make it possible for me to wear a passable face. Good gracious, Max shouted. shaking my hand violently. Diligent. Na your eye be this? Diligent was a version of Odili I had borne at school. Cool Max, I greeted him in return. The writer of these lines. We laughed and laughed, and the tears I had not shed last night came to my eyes. Max suspected nothing, and even though I was just coming, and even though I was just coming from home, and even thought I was just coming from home, I told him rather shamefacedly that I had been in town for the past few days but hadn't found it possible to contact him. He took this to be a reference to his having no telephone in the house, in fact, which in turn could be a reflection on his practice. I have been on the waiting list for a telephone for 2 months, he said defensively. You see, I have not given anyone a bribe and I don't know any big gun. So you've been staying with that corrupt, empty headed, illiterate capitalist? Sorry, oh. Nah, matter of can't help, I said. He not my old teacher, you know. I said, dipping my bread in the cup of hot cocoa drink Max's boy had made for me. Chief Nanga and Elsie already seemed so distant that I could have talked about them like casual acquaintances. But I was not going to delay Max by talking now. And in any case, I had no wish to make him think that I only remembered him when I could no longer enjoy the flesh pots of Chief Nanga's home. Within minutes, I was already feeling so relaxed and at ease here that I wondered what piece of ill fate took me to Chief Nanga in the first place. So he was totally betrayed by his former teacher and the minister of culture, whom had respected, who lived in a 7-bedroom, 7-bathroom house, Chief Nanga, and his girl, Elsie, whom he had been sleeping with since his college days. But Elsie was a loose woman, and he finally saw her as a slut because he felt totally betrayed by her. Now, whether she was a slut or not is up for debate because the reality of the thing is that she was Ralph's girlfriend, Ralph's fiance, as a matter of fact. So Elsie was probably just looking for another opportunity to socially climb, while Odili was her good time friend, her good time boy, something to do while she was away at college and in nursing school and learning to be a nurse, preparing to go to England to be with Ralph, remember? But the opportunity to be a minister's mistress was quite an honor. So that's something to think about there. Chapter 8. Bwana Haguziki says that he can't get mad. There's enough left over. Elsie's still a right, shaking his head. He's mad somebody else's parts wasn't your woman. She was just community property. Exactly. She was just community property. Chapter 8. It was only after Max had left for court at around 9 that I finally felt the full weight of the previous night's humiliation settling down on me. The heat and anger had now largely evaporated, leaving the cold fact that another man had wrenched my girlfriend from my hand and led her to bed under my very eyes, and I had done nothing about it, could do nothing about it. But this wasn't his girlfriend. This was his girl who was a friend with benefits that he was having relations with. So he's reframing this in his own mind. Could do nothing about it. And why? Because the man was a minister bloated by the flatulence of ill-gotten wealth, living in a mansion built with public money, riding in a Cadillac, and watched over by a one-eyed hired thug. And as though that were not enough, he had had the obscene effrontery to say he thought I was too tired, A man or 50 or more with a son in a secondary school and a wife whose dress gets caught between the buttocks thought I was too tired. And here I was, doing nothing about it except speculating whether Elsie would go back to her hospital that day or spend another night with Chief Nanga. By late afternoon, I even had the crazy, preposterous idea of wanting to go to a public telephone and put through an anonymous call. Of course, I killed that disgraceful thought right away. But I suppose it was possible, judging by the way things finally worked themselves out, that these weak and trivial thoughts might have been a sort of smokescreen behind which, unknown to me, weighty decisions were taking shape. It was perhaps like the theory of writing examinations that one of my lectures used to propound to us. He said the right technique was to read all the questions once through, select those you want to answer, and then start with the easiest. His theory being that while you were answering the easy number, your subconscious was set to work arranging the others for you. I tried it out for my degree examination, and although the result was not exactly startling, I suppose it could have been worse. But on the present question of Chief Nanga, my subconscious, or something very much like it, seemed to have voluntarily gone into operation. I was just flapping about like a trapped bird, then when suddenly I saw the opening. I saw that Elsie did not matter in the least. What mattered was that a man had treated me as no man had a right to treat another, not even if he was master and the other was slave. And my manhood required that I make him pay for his insult in full measure. In flesh and blood terms, I realized that I must go back, seek out Nanga's intended parlor wife, and give her the works, good and proper. All this flashed through my mind in one brief moment of blinding insight, just like that, without warning. I was singing happily when Max came home in the late afternoon. He tried to be furious with his houseboy for not giving me my share of the lunch when it was ready, but I went straight to the boy's defense and said he had offered to serve me, but that I insisted on waiting, which was quite untrue. As we ate, I told Max about Elsie and Chief Nanga, amending the story in several minor particulars and generally making light of it all, not only because I was anxious to play down my humiliation, but even more because I no longer cared for anything except revenge. If you put juju on a woman, it will catch, that old trotter, said Max after I told the story. I know someone who did, I said lightheartedly, but the old rotter wasn't caught. Then I told him the story of the woman who didn't take off her bra, thinking it would amuse him. I was wrong. That's all they care for, he said with a solemn face. Women, cars, landed property. But what else can you expect when intelligent people leave politics to illiterates like Chief Nanga? The appearance of comparative peace with Max's house presented me that morning proved quite deceptive. Or perhaps some of Nanga's queen bee characteristics had rubbed off on me and transformed me into an independent little nucleus of activity which I trailed with me into this new place. That first night, I not only heard of a new political party about to be born, but got myself enrolled as a foundational member. Max and some of his friends, having watched with deepening disillusion the use to which our hard won freedoms was being corrupt, mediocre politicians had decided to come together and launch, the Common People's Convention. There were 8 young people in his room that evening. All but one were citizens of our country, mostly professional types. The only lady there was a very beautiful lawyer. I learned afterwards was engaged to Max, whom she had first met at the London School of Economics. There was a trade unionist, a doctor, another lawyer, a teacher, and a newspaper columnist. Max introduced me without any previous consultation as a trustworthy comrade who had only the other day had his girlfriend snatched from him by a minister who shall remain nameless. Naturally, I did not care for that kind of image or reputation, so I promptly intervened to point out that the woman in question was not, strictly speaking, my girlfriend, but a casual acquaintance with whom both Chief Nanga and I knew. So it was Chief Nanga, yes, said the European, and everyone burst out laughing. Who else could it be? Said one of the others. The white man was apparently from one of the Eastern Bloc countries. He did not neglect to stress to me, in an aside, that he was there only as a friend of Max's. He told me a lot of things quietly while the others were discussing some obscure details about the launching. I was as much interested in what he said as the way he said it. His English was had an exotic quality about it, as when he said it was good to see intellectuals like Max, myself, and the rest coming out of their tower of elephant tusk into active politics. And he often punctuated whatever he was saying with yes, spoke with the accent, spoken with the accent of a question. I must say that I was immediately taken with the idea of the Common People's Convention. Apart from everything else, it would add a second string to my bow when I came to deal with Nanga. But right now, I was anxious not to appear to Max and his friends as the easily impressed type. I suppose I wanted to erase whatever impression was left of Max's misfortune of unintentional presentation of me as a kind of pitiable jellyfish. So I made what I intended to be a little spirited, skeptical speech, saying, It is very kind of you, gentlemen and lady. I say gentleman and lady advisedly because this happens to be Africa. It is very kind of you to accept me so readily. I wish to assure you all that your confidence will be fully justified. But without trying to put a cat among your pigeons, I must say that I find it somewhat odd that a party calling itself the Common People's Convention should be made up of only professional men and women. I was interrupted by many voices at once, but the rest gave way to Max. This is not entirely accurate, Odili. What you see here is only the vanguard, the planning stage. Once we are ready, we shall draw in the worker, the farmer, the blacksmith, and the carpenter. And the unemployed, of course, said the young lady with the confidence of a beautiful woman who has brains as well, which I find a little intimidating. And I'd like to take our friend up on a purely historical point. The great revolutions of history were started by the intellectuals, not the common people. Karl Marx was not a common man. He wasn't even Russian. The trade unionists applauded the speech by clapping and shouting, Hear, hear. The rest made different kinds of appreciative noises. Well, well, I thought, and gave up altogether my next idea of asking how the thing was going to be financed. At the same time, said Max, acting the perfect chairman, I can't say that I blame Odili for making that point. He's always been a stickler for thoroughness. Do you know the name we called him at school? Diligent. Diligent. Everyone laughed. I should add that he was called Cool Max, I said. He always played it cool. And still does, said the lady with a wink at him. I beg your pardon, protested Max playfully. Anyhow, lady and gentlemen, or rather gentleman and lady, to borrow a friend's fine example. Max, protested the girl in marked outrage. Well, I never. I think to save all difficulty, yes, we should simply say comrades, yes, suggested the European, laughing nervously, which made me think he wasn't joking like the rest of us. Hear, hear, said the trade unionist. Yes, said Max coolly, except that, as I've said several times before, I don't want anybody to say that we are communists. We can't afford that label. It would simply finish us. Our opponents would point to us and say, look at those crazy people who want to have everything in common, including their wives. And that would be the end of it. That's the plain fact. I don't know about that, said the trade unionist. I think our trouble in this country is that we are too nervous. We say we are neutral, but as soon as we hear communists, we begin to shake and piss for trouser. Excuse me, he said to the lady, and dropped the pigeon and suddenly as he had slid into it. The other day, somebody asked me, why did I go to Russia last January? I told him it was because if you look in only one direction, your neck will become stiff. We all laughed loudly, especially the European. You see how they got these white people mixed up in our business as we trying to plan a revolution? They got this European all up in the mix, making plans, inflecting and injecting his ideas and different thoughts, and we're even ubiquitously fascinated by his presence of being. But that's just my opinion. I know, Joe, began Max, but Joe did not yield easily. No, excuse me, Max, he said. I am serious. We are either independent in this country or we are not. We are not, said Max. And everyone laughed again, including Joe this time. All the heat apparently siphoned off him. I was struck by Max's cool, sure touch. He was clearly in control of the situation, and he seemed to me to have just the right mixture of faith and down to earth, practical common sense. We will not win the next election, he told me on another occasion. In itself, it was a fairly obvious statement. But how many mushroom political parties had we seen spring up, prophesy a landslide victory for themselves, and then shrivel up again? What we must do is get something going, said Max, however small, and wait for it to blow up. It's bound to come. I don't know how or when, but it's got to come. You simply cannot have this stagnation and corruption going on indefinitely. How do you propose getting the money? We will get some, he smiled. Enough to finance ordinary election expenses. We will leave mass bribing of the electors to the POP and the PAP. We will simply drop cats among their pigeons here and there, stand aside and watch. I am right now assembling the documentary evidence I can find, all the documentary evidence I can find of corruption in high places. Brother, it will make you weep, I am sure. Because I had asked him jokingly as we were about to retire to bed if he still wrote poetry, Max had gone and fished out lines he wrote 7 years ago to the music of the famous High Life. He wrote it during the intoxicating months of high hope soon after independence. He now sang it like a dirge, and believe me, tears welled up in the back of my eyes. Tears for the dead infant hope. You may call me sentimental if you like. I have the poem, Dance Offering to the Earth Mother, right here before me. As I write, and I could quote the whole of it, but it could never convey the print of the tragic feeling I had that evening as Max sang it, tapping his foot to the high life rhythm and bringing back vividly the gaiety and high promise of 7 years ago, which now seemed more than 7 lifetimes away. I will return her to home to her. Many centuries I have wandered, and I will make my offering at the feet of my lovely mother. I will rebuild her house, the holy places they raped and plundered, and I will take it, make it fine with blackwood bronzes and terracotta. I read this last verse over and over again. Poor black mother, waiting so long for her infant son to come of age and comfort her and repay her for the years of shame and neglect. And the son has pinned so much hope on turning out to be Chief Nanga. Poor black mother, I said aloud. Yes, poor black mother, said Max, looking out of the window after a long interval. He turned around and asked if I remembered my Bible. Not really. Why? Well, I can't get it out of my system. You know, my father is an Anglican priest. No, when you talked about poor black mother just now, I remembered a passage. It goes something like this. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She could not be comforted because they are not. It is a favorite of my father's, who, by the way, still thinks we should have never asked the white man to go. Perhaps he is right, I said. Well, no. The trouble is that he hasn't had very much out of gotten very much out of independence personally. There simply weren't any white posts in his profession that he could take over. There is only one bishop in the entire diocese, and he's already an African. You are unfair to the old man, I said, laughing. You should hear some of the things the old man says about me. I remember when I last went to see him with Eunice. He said, "Who knows? I might get a son before him." Oh, we crack such expensive jokes. You are an only son, aren't you? Yes. I felt so envious. You know, Odili, he began suddenly after a longish pause, I don't believe in providence and all that kind of stuff, but your arrival, just at this very moment, is most fortunate. You see, we were planning to appoint able and dynamic organizing secretaries in each of the regions very soon. Now we've got you. We don't have to worry our head about the Southeast anymore. I'll do what I can, Max, I said. Perhaps the most astonishing thing Max told me about the new party was that one of the junior ministers in the government was behind it. What is he doing in the government if he is so dissatisfied with it? I asked naively. Why doesn't he resign? Resign, laughed Max. Where do you think we are? Britain or something? Don't be funny, Odili. I'm not being funny, I said hotly, perhaps more hotly than was called for. I knew very well and needed no reminder that we were not in Britain or something. that when a man resigned in our country, it was invariably with an eye on the main chance, as when a few years ago, 10 newly elected PAP members of parliament switched parties at the opening of the session and given the POP a comfortable majority overnight in return for ministerial appointments. And, if one believed the rumors, a little cash prize each as well. All that was well known, but I would have thought it was better to start our new party clean with a different kind of philosophy. I know how you feel, said Max rather patronizingly. I felt like that at first, but we must face certain facts. You take a man like Nanga now on a salary of 4,000 plus all the, you know, what his salary was as an elementary school teacher, perhaps not more than £8 a month. Now you expect a man like that to resign as a matter of principle? Assuming, that is, that he can recognize principle when he sees it, I added somewhat pompously. Well, exactly. I'm not saying mark you that our man is like Nanga. He is a true nationalist and would not hesitate to resign if he felt it was really necessary. But as he himself points out, do we commit suicide every day we feel unhappy with the state of the world? It's hardly the same thing, I said. Well, I know, but having a man like him right in the government is very essential, I can assure you. He tells me all that goes on. In that sense, I suppose you are right. As the saying goes, it is only when you are close to a man that you can begin to smell his breath. Well, exactly. And we're going to end it right there and pick up on chapter 9. We're going to end it right there and pick up on chapter 9 on Thursday. They are trying to plot a political overthrow and come up with a new party system. This is interesting because they have white people in the mix. We need to learn our lesson that having these white people in the mix is not to our advantage. At some point, we have to learn that we can take the knowledge and information that white people have, we can convert it into an African-centered perspective, and we don't have to accept their physical presence in the midst of our movements. Thank you so much for being here, Bwana Guziki and Sister Raw with the elders that listen with you. I know KW Don 7 is listening. Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast is listening. The Forecast Radio is listening. And so many others. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I thank you for tuning in. If you get a chance, answer my poll question. I know it's a little off brand for this channel, but I think that these books that I'm suggesting have some relevance to our being able to connect with people, to know why, to get to the why we need to appeal to their consciousness in a certain way. It goes back to our African roots because, they systematized the things that they saw us doing and put them in a belief system. And so often they have studied us and then they systematized what they saw us doing. And then they packaged it to us and said, this is how you're required to act. And some of it is to their benefit and some of it is not to their benefit. But we'll talk more about that later. All right. I will talk to you soon, guys. I'll see you Thursday. Peace.